title of my talk is Humanitarian Archaeology. And I started to mention that my wife and I have two enterprises, a consulting business and a nonprofit. And we use these two entities to tag team on these volunteer efforts. So the title Humanitarian Archaeology is something I kind of made up in thinking about what we've been doing over the last few years with regard to helping folks recover the remains of family members and return them to those families. I'm going to give this presentation basically in two parts. I'm going to talk about first these wildfires that have affected California. We've been working within these wildfire areas, excavating within burned buildings to find human remains and return those to families. And the second part of the talk is about working at World War II lost sites in Europe, and we're excavating to find missing military personnel and return those remains back to those families. So I'm going to give this presentation in two parts. Figure I can talk for about 30 minutes, and then I'm going to run out of steam, and hopefully there'll be a question or two. So we're off. I'm going to try to get my, how do I do this now, Kaylin? I'm not as tech savvy as you.
It turned to the next one if that's what you're asking.
Okay, well, it's not without struggles here. I'm trying to get up my notes. So are you seeing the slideshow?
No, yeah, but not in full screen.
Okay, if I go like this, well, drat. All right, I'm just gonna talk then.
Yeah, I mean,
it might not be as scripted as I'd like, because I like to plan these things, but here we go. So this is a map, a recent graphic that was created depicting drought in the West. The Western US is in a record-setting drought. And this drought, there was an article recently published, I think in Nature, and they're saying that it's currently the driest it's been in the last 400 years. So with climate change and drought, we're experiencing an increased frequency and intensity of wildfires. So this is, I'm gonna say right now, this is the only graphic that is kind of sciencey in the whole thing. Everything else is pictures. So I put this up front, we'll talk through it. What you're looking at here is a 32-year record of wildfires in California. So, and it depicts the number of acres burned each year. And that trend line that's running through the middle of them is a threatening line, because it's showing that wildfire risk is on the rise. In California, it's in the last few years, it's common to lose 2 to 3 million acres of fire to fire, and these effects have been catastrophic. So climate change is happening, drought is happening, increased wildfires, and so my involvement in doing cremated remains recovery started in 2017. So we just had our anniversary this month, 5 years ago, when a horrible windstorm came through in the middle of the drought. Fires were ignited by electrical lines, and all at the same time in the middle of the night in Northern California. And this map is at the bottom, you can see San Francisco. So this is Northern California. Santa Rosa is the community that I live in. And so the fire, we've got drought, record high winds. There was 70-mile-an-hour winds that night. It was hot. And we had dense housing, and this fire started, and it quickly traveled about 25 miles into the city. And it started burning down the town. Caught everybody off guard. Crazy. People are evacuating the town. Let's see. Very, very catastrophic event. So we ended up losing over 8,400 homes that night. It burned through the center of an urban city, and we lost 25% of the houses. Whole communities were destroyed. And it left behind this kind of surreal landscape. And so we were, reeling from this event. My family evacuated. Here we go. So the fire itself was the most destructive at the time in California history. 180,000 acres, 32 people died that night, and it caused about $10 billion in damages. And so we thought that was pretty terrible, but this was just a precursor to what we were going to see in the coming years. This is the campfire in Paradise, which was almost twice as catastrophic. 80 some odd people died in that event. Similar wind event ignited fire with utility lines, and the whole town was destroyed. So after the event in Santa Rosa, I was contacted by someone who I shared office space with, and he had the remains of both his father and his mother, their ashes in his home, and his home was destroyed. And he was distraught because he wasn't able to follow through their wishes, which was to, put them in a certain place and follow through with their final wish. So he asked, is there anything that I can do to help, knowing that I'm an archaeologist and I work with human remains? And I said, well, let me call some folks and see what we can do. So I contacted the Institute for Canine Forensics. They're a group of folks that are trained dogs to look for human remains, including human ash. And we went out and went to my friend's house and found dug through the burnt building and found his parents' ashes. And so he was able to do what he was wishing to do with his, and he's very thankful. Well, so that made a splash in the paper, the local newspaper. And then we were inundated with phone calls with other people that were in the same situation, who had human remains in their homes. And it was the only thing they wanted to take to try to follow through with their wishes. So we started doing archaeology in these houses and excavating. And we had, this is to my knowledge, something that's never been done before. So there was no playbook. There was no methods to doing this. We had to devise all this as in the process of doing. So the first thing we do is we do a safety assessment. I'm standing there with the homeowner, and she's pointing to the part of the house where she thinks the remains were. So we ask, who are you looking for? Is this your husband and your daughter? What kind of vessel were they kept in? Is this a wooden box that was probably destroyed, or was this a ceramic urn which may have survived the fire? And about where in the home should we be searching, right? So we're collecting some basic information on where to search. This is what these scenes look like. And when you walk up to these scenes, the first thing you think is, this is impossible. It is a cacophony of textures and ash, and you're literally looking for a pocket of ash in a heaping mound of ash. And how could this possibly work? Well, it does, and I'll show you some results. So the first thing we do after we've interviewed the homeowner and got some basic information about who and what we're looking for and where, then we have the canine forensic team come out and the dogs search the site. And these dogs are trained on human ash to detect the odor. And when they detect it, they alert by lying down. And that means that they found scent and they're alerting at where the scent is strongest. So here's a dog searching the scene of this building, and she alerts. She's picked up the scent, and she tends to point toward the source. So these ashes appear to be on the stairwell. Then we'll have a second dog come out and search the scene and alert. And the second dog, it didn't see the first dog search, and the handlers are not prompting the dogs on where to alert. And invariably the dog will alert at almost the same spot. So then we know we have 2 points of information: where the client said to look and where the dogs are suggesting. Then, so this is Annie. She's a remarkable dog. Then we get involved in our space and we go out and we, first thing we do is we try to survey the scene and see if we can just spot any human ash on where the dogs have alerted. And then we start an excavation using trowels and shovels. We're scraping away the debris and trying to look for the remains. And when we start to find remains, we'll use archaeological methods, similar, archaeological methods that were originally designed for studying the past. We're adapting to this situation, this very specific purpose. And so we'll pedestal the remains in place. We're not screening any material because the ash would just simply go through a screen, right? We're trying to create a feature excavation. And then we'll ultimately collect the ashes and give it back to the family. So here I've identified, in this case, this was really difficult. It was a 2-story home, and the ashes were kept on the exterior wall, which collapsed and then fell and spilled across the stairwell. So we're not looking for a concentration of ash at this point. It is a lens of ash within ashes of the building. And so, here we're carefully separating what we think is human ash from the debris from the building. And so, the question is like, how do you know the difference between ash of a building and human ash? Well, they are different. The debris of a building is going to be a heterogeneous textures of drywall and wood and other substances, whereas human ash, if it hasn't been dispersed, will be in a concentration. It'll be a clump about the size of a loaf of bread, a small loaf of bread. Because it's processed at the crematorium, the ash is going to be very fine and homogeneous. And it'll have a granular structure when you rub it between your fingers, because it'll have small fragments of bone in it. And it tends to be a different color. It's usually a kind of an orangish to salmon color, but I've seen it gray and jet white as well. A lot of variability. Pictured here is human ash that we identified on the surface, right? You can see that this pocket of orange kind of fine ash is different than the rest of the building, right? And when we exposed it, it was much larger than what you see here. Here's some examples of human ash, and that's recovering them. In the bottom left, what the archaeologist is holding there is a medallion. By law, the crematorium is required to put a medallion with the corpse at the crematorium to keep track of the remains and make sure that that is absolutely the same individual. So this medallion has a number on it that's a unique identifier to that individual. And we're finding these medallions in these ash pockets. So we are certain that we're finding the right person. Yeah. So I'm going to I'm going to try to tell a couple stories I had written down. So I want to read them because I think they're well composed. This was one of the first recoveries here. We hadn't figured out our personal protective equipment thing yet, and we're digging through these burned buildings, which are highly toxic, and we'd upped our game after this, the first kind of trial runs. The man in the middle is holding a box with his brother's ashes in him, who was murdered at the age of 25. Let me see if I can get my notes up without this going. Okay. So you probably see my notes now. I don't know how to do this. Kaylin, are you still there? You can see the slides or my notes?
Just the slides.
Sweet. Okay. So I'm going to read a story of one of our first recoveries. Shoot, this is so complicated. Sorry, guys. No, wish I was more tech savvy. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to read two stories that were written. I'm trying to talk through this stuff. The first one is a story from Lenore Hansen. So somewhere in the twisted mass of debris and ruins of Lenore Hansen's home were the remains of her 30-year-old daughter, Erin, who died of cancer, leaving behind two sons. Lenore kept her daughter's ashes in a wooden box in the bedroom closet. There was no time to grab the box when the firestorm bore down on Lenore's creekside home. The fire destroyed Lenore's home, and now Erin's ashes are mixed in the mass of collapsed walls, broken furniture, and layers of debris. So I'm going to try to advance the slide. That doesn't advance the slide. This is so silly. Okay, well, we'll get through this together. Lenore pointed to the part of the devastated house where Erin's ashes were kept. Lynn called her dog Piper, a black border collie, to examine the scene. Cautiously stepping through the ruins, Piper searched the area adjacent cinder block walls and around deformed metal objects, periodically testing the air for faint odors. Piper's careful gait abruptly stiffened. He picked up the scent. She immediately laid down, alerting Lynn that she smelled what we were looking for. We carefully troweled through the loose ash and rubble, exposing the ground around where the dog signaled, then progressing inward in an effort to identify, isolate, and expose the cremated remains. After minutes of searching, we found a discrete pocket of faint red-colored gritty ash. Picking through the deposit, we recognized small bits of bone. We had found Erin's ashes. So that's the first, this was one of the first times we did this. And it was pretty emotional. This story was written by Kim Wooten, who Kaylin knows. We worked together in Poland. She's a great archaeologist, historic archaeologist out here in California, and she wrote this after she volunteered on the project. When you watch a disaster like the fires in Northern California play out across your television, you sit in your own home, hundreds of miles away, knowing there's no possible way to help those communities out, to help their friends, waiting to find out if their homes remain intact. When the opportunity came to work with the canine units in an attempt to recover cremated remains of loved ones, my husband and I, both archaeologists, knew it was a way we could help, not just the people of Santa Rosa, who literally lost everything, but a way to help ourselves deal with the devastation. Most archaeologists are familiar with dead people. I've excavated the skeletons of both children and adults, and were attuned to even the smallest bits of human bone or a tooth. But those are the remains of long dead people with no known family, or whose families are also long dead. Being an archaeologist doesn't prepare you for the emotional toll of reuniting living loved ones with the remains of a parent or a child or a sibling or a spouse. Handing someone the ashes of their father while covered in the ash of their former homes and surrounded by the charred and broken remains of their lives is utterly overwhelming. And as an archaeologist, you don't just look for cremated remains. Trowel through the entire home, now compacted to a few inches of ash, without seeing the rest of the destruction: a ceramic elephant, a record collection, melted Christmas ornaments, grandma's porcelain collection. You want to gather it all up and return it to its owners. Archaeologists are used to broken bits of people's lives, but not like this. Not on such a scale, and not with living people connected to those artifacts. I'm going to try to read this next part. In the end, the most powerful moment for me was watching another crew member recover the remains of a 40-year-old woman who had died earlier that year. Watching her mother hold her daughter's remains broke every barrier that had kept me from crying with the previous homeowners. After a day of both physically and emotionally exhausting, it was hard to see this mother's pain. Let's see. I tried to be discreet and pry away from the family, but I still caught someone's attention. The human remains detection dog we've been working with all day, Piper, came over and lay down next to me, putting her head in my lap, demanding I pet her. It was an amazing moment on every level. So sorry about that. That's some powerful stuff. So I want to say that the recovery is possible in these disaster events. And now that we're doing this work, we also realize that it's essential. It's relevant, it's rewarding, it's meaningful. And archaeologists, we're constantly struggling to justify that what we do as archaeologists is meaningful, relevant, and rewarding. And this is something that really stands out. And we expect there to be future disasters, and we're looking to get more agency involvement to support this work. To date, we've worked in 17 disaster areas, and we've excavated over 300 houses. We were out excavating houses last weekend in California. All right, so that was part one. I'm glad that part's over. Part two, and how am I doing on time? I'm gonna discuss our work with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, looking for missing personnel from World War II. So we've been going since 2019. We've been doing missions in Europe, looking for missing personnel to return those remains to those military families. So the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, its purpose is to find folks and bring them back to the military families. And this is a map of current missing personnel worldwide. So there's currently about 80,000 people missing worldwide from the various conflicts. There's about 72,000 missing alone from World War II, of which roughly 20,000 are in Europe, and that's where we've been working. So I'm going to tell a quick story about the loss incident. This is a B-17G bomber that was on a bombing run. We're looking for these guys, right? They took off from an airfield in March of 1945, almost the end of the war, in northern Italy, and we're heading to Rosslyn, Germany, to try to destroy a synthetic oil refinery. So they're in their squadron at 22,000 feet. When they approach the target, they enter a huge flak field because there's defenses around the refinery. And the pilot watches the plane explode in front of him. They stay on target, fly into the flak field, and are hit. And one of their engines gets knocked out, and they stay on target and they drop their payload on target. They take several more hits, and then when the squadron turns around to fly back to Italy, these guys turned right and started flying east. They knew that the plane was so badly damaged that they weren't going to make it back to Italy. And their goal now was to try to crash land in Russian controlled territory so they could crash in an Allied friendly area. When they separated from the group, the captain went through the ship and checked in on everybody. The tail gunner had been hit by flak and was bleeding in the leg, but he could stay in his position. And the intercom on board had been knocked out. He told everybody, if the fighting gets too hot, you're at liberty to bail out. So don your parachutes and expect to be attacked by German fighters. When you separate from the group, they're in dire straits. So shortly after, they're flying east, running out of fuel, and they're descended on by 4 or 5 Messerschmitt 109s, German fighters. They get in an air battle that lasts about 15 minutes. And they're shooting. They've got 10 50 cal machine guns on board. This thing's a flying fortress. They're fighting, but they're losing. Another engine catches on fire. The bomb bay catches on fire, and the plane's going to crash. So people start bailing out of the plane. Some of the last people to jump are the pilot, co-pilot, and the navigator. And the pilot is descending in his parachute, and then he's getting strafed by the fighters. And the bombardier's parachute is pierced, and he falls to the ground and dies. They watch the plane explode below them as the Messerschmitts are attacking him. He gets to the ground. They hide in a haystack, and then the pilot and co-pilot are captured by ground forces. The navigator's remains are found later and subsequently identified. The other 7 missing individuals that were on the plane are missing, and are missing to this day. So the plane crashed in southwestern Poland. What is today Poland was then Germany. And the red dot is kind of where the crash site is. This is Lower Silesia, near about 40 minutes south of Wrocław, if anyone's familiar with Poland. The plane crashed in a rural area. It's an active agricultural field. This area has been cultivated for years, and scattered across 3 agricultural fields, a road, and a canal. The site itself is quite large. You can imagine when a 66,000-pound artifact doing 200 miles an hour hits the ground, it makes a pretty big site. This is a forensic archaeological investigation that we're conducting, looking for remains. It's in an active agricultural field. We've contacted the Polish landowners and farmers and gotten their permission, as well as permit from universities and the Office of Monument Protection. This is seen here is the 3rd year of excavations. This was our 2nd year. These excavations tend to be quite large, unlike in other archaeological excavations where we're sampling the site. Our intent is to dig the entire site, and this site is over 200 meters long. So we want to leave no chance that any of the missing soldiers' remains are still at the site. And when we get to that point, we'll close it. So each year we're digging about 80 cubic meters of sediments out of the site. This is an aerial where we're digging around the excavation from the prior year and buffering it because we found so much stuff. We need to create a buffer and keep digging. This is a soil profile of the bridge abutment. So talk quickly about site formation processes and thinking about where we would find remains. So this plane crashes in an agricultural field and the farmers are going to want to put it back into production, right? So they would have removed the debris. Well, the closest place is this berm adjacent to stream. So we assumed that a lot of this stuff was going to get pushed out of the way and that human remains and artifacts may also be in that area out of the ag field. So this is showing the stratigraphy of the agricultural field and this adjacent berm where we're finding materials that kind of lived up to our expectation that the farmers would clean up the field. Some of the stuff we're finding is parachutes in the upper right. That's an oxygen tank. You know, if you're 20,000, the B-17 is not a pressurized cabin. Everybody has to have a mask on with compressed air, and you know there's structural parts of the plane. Bottom right, those are aviator goggles made by Polaroid. Just imagine what the person saw looking through those goggles in the last moment this plane was going alive. This is a photo from last month, right, or a month or so ago. We were over there excavating. I told you there was remains that fell into this canal, which is actually a stream. We got permission from the water authority in Poland to excavate and dredge out the base of the stream. That resulted in a lot of wet sediments that we had to process. So we created a wet screening station, a large sediment pond, and we're pulling water from the stream to wash dirt. And we've also got terrestrial excavations going where we're dry screening stuff. This is our wet screening setup. We have 12 stations that we're running, processing dirt as fast as we can. We had a field lab. So as the screen loads of artifacts come out, we're over here picking through the stuff and sorting it. This is some of the stuff this is an example of one screen. There's 50 cal machine gun rounds that are live, unexploded ordnances. There's airplane skin. I see unidentifiable plane parts in that left screen. And to the right, we're also, the plane crashed in a medieval site. So there's medieval pottery throughout it, as well as lithics and things. So we had an agreement with the museum at the University of Wrocław to take all the materials that we collected in the field. So we're running a field catalog, bagging everything, and handed over all this stuff at the end of the project. Towards the end of the project, we found this really cool feature, which was a secondary refuse deposit of aircraft wreckage. This was, you know, the farmer dug a pit and buried all this aircraft wreckage, and dug this thing up. In the wreckage, there was the piece on the left is a, let's see, that is the bombardier's control panel. So that's the bombs away, where the bombardiers, when they approach target, he takes over final control. He's flying the plane and he drops the target, drops the payload. So that's this switch panel. And then on the right, that's the co-pilot switch panel for starting the engines. There's 4 engines on the B-17. So this is a closing shot from our group photo. There's Kaylin looking great. We had a lot of fun. This group of people, man, we work hard and play hard. This was, I think we did 30 days, 20 days of digging at this site, or 30. It was a lot of digging, man. Cross your eyes. This is a shot of our nonprofit that's doing the cremated remains recovery. They also support bringing volunteers to Europe to help out on these excavations with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. You can log on there if you want to be a volunteer or make a donation. We'd really appreciate it. I guess, you know, I should note that I've been intentionally vague when I was talking about the DPA work, because that's a forensic archaeological excavation. And I can't discuss certain findings with you until those are released to the family members. So I'm happy to answer questions about methods and things, but talking about specifics of our findings on the DPA project, I won't answer those questions, just saying that if you do have questions. Thanks everyone for your time. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you, Alex. This was great. If
Yeah.
anyone has any questions, you can ask them now.
So thorough, no one has any questions. That's all right. You can go to dinner early. Well, I appreciate everyone's time, listening to me yap along and hear about this stuff. You know, I had no background in doing this kind of work. You know, my academic training is in hunter-gatherer studies and geoarchaeology, right? And I got thrown into this stuff because my hometown burned down. And, you know, when that happens, you just want to get in there and help, right? And this turned out to be something that we really made a difference helping people. And so we started a nonprofit, and boy, we've been very active with that. Similarly, you know, I had no background training in forensic archaeology and I was woefully ignorant of World War II history. But that didn't stop us. You know, I have a reputation of doing big projects and getting stuff done. And that's what folks are looking for over there. They want hard work, quality work. And so I lucked into this DPA work, which has been really fun. Been a pleasure to bring so many folks over there and work with folks and dig sites. Yeah.
It looks like no one has any questions.
Perfect.
Dr. Here, wait a second. Yeah, no questions, but this is very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Cerezo Rahman from the University of Oklahoma. She said, thank you very much. And then someone who I guess knows you named Donna says, great to see you.
Oh, thanks, Donna. Hey. Thanks for sitting in on the top.
Awesome. Well, if that is it, then have a good night. Thank you everyone again for joining us. We will be posting this on our YouTube channel within the next week. So we will post that link on our website and on our Facebook. So thank you so much.
Thanks for hosting. It's been my pleasure. Take care, everyone.